Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Seegers, and this time we're again joined by Derek Bender to discuss a whole bunch of recent Xbox One news. So let's get started. Alright Derek, so there was some surprising news coming out this morning, and I say kinda surprising, but it's something a lot of people, including us, expected and hoped for, but the timing was surprising being a month before E3. And of course the biggest news is that, I guess it's kind of like a tie between these two things, and that is, Microsoft is dropping the price of the Xbox One by $100 to $399, matching the price of the PlayStation 4, and the way in which they're doing that is by getting rid of the Kinect from the bundle. You're no longer forced to buy it, you will be able to buy it optionally as an accessory later on, but starting June 9th, you won't be required at all. So I think so far that's all good news. And on top of that, they announced some more features of Xbox Live, being that they're going to beef up basically the gold game selection, so you'll have access to better games for free with your subscription, which is kind of an oxymoron. It's not free if you're paying for it, but it's a nice bonus on top of your subscription a lot of people are already paying. But on top of that subscription, you'll no longer need it in order to access services like Netflix and Hulu Plus. So this is all good news, I think. But before we dive into specifics, or into my specifics, let's get your overall reaction to this.
It's pretty much the same as you, is we saw this coming, or, well, not really saw it coming. We weren't sure how long they were going to hold on to this whole idea that Kinect needs to be with the Xbox One, if they would push for it more. Like, let's say, for example, if the Xbox One had been a bigger success than the PS4, I don't think they would have ever changed it. However, because it is not hitting the sales number that the PS4 is, it's obviously because of price. And nobody's really used the Kinect for anything too major, as far as I know.
There's Kinect Sports, and that's like it.
Kinect Sports. I mean, the biggest game on the system is arguably Titanfall, and I don't believe that uses the Kinect at all.
Right.
So it's sort of just like almost a Wii situation where the best games didn't really use the Kinect that much, so why include it if people aren't going to use it and developers aren't going to really use it and people just want to play good games. So I think this all just came into basically it was like, yeah, it's time to get rid of this thing. Let's see if we can sell a bit more consoles by dropping the price $100, making the Kinect an accessory again. It worked pretty well for the Xbox 360, so maybe this will help us again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very smart move. The Kinect, I mean, for me personally, and it seems for most gamers, didn't seem to be that enticing. Now, Xbox did release figures saying that 80% of people do use Kinect, having it, but there's so many ways in which you can measure that metric. I mean, how meaningful is that really? I think telling your Xbox to turn off, I don't think people deem to be a crucial function of having Kinect. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Xbox One is kind of getting killed in sales relative to the PlayStation 4, which isn't even to speak of the game, the Wii U at this point, which comparatively is doing far worse. But because Xbox is riding pretty high and mighty coming off last generation, where they did very well for most of it. I mean, even up to now, arguably. And so now entering this new generation, where right out of the gate, the PlayStation 4 is basically beating them in all metrics. Yeah, I mean, I think PlayStation kind of forced them to make a move, and this is I mean, again, this is something that needed to happen, but it is kind of surprising. Just because Xbox has put so much into Kinect, being R&D, and the fact that they've even vocally said that this is the future of their platform, and now they're going back on that essentially. I mean, by divorcing Kinect from it, they're basically saying like this is really a huge change for them. I mean, this is basically a future that's free of Kinect. They'll have the early adopters who have Kinect, and they'll have people who pick it up later on. I don't think many people are going to pick it up later on. I think this is basically them killing Kinect. I think they'll still support it officially, but I think, by and large, this is them, I don't think we'll see much further development on the Kinect front, especially game-wise. We've barely seen any games. So I think, yeah, they're basically sending Kinect off to die at this point, eventually. If not directly, just by virtue of not requiring it.
Yeah, I don't think Kinect's going to die at all. I think... I mean, it lasted, whether through sheer force of will or anything else, but it did last for a good portion of the 360's lifespan being an accessory. So, I mean, it could still work like that with the new, now that it's a separate piece to the Xbox One. The only interesting thing is that the early adopters all do have it, and it's a question of like, okay, do the new adopters, will they want to still get the Kinect as part of as part of a bundle, or do they really just not care and want to go for the cheaper system? So it's a much different situation, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to roll out for Microsoft in the end. But I do think they've realized that it's much better to get the system price down in order to better compete with Sony.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple factors. Yeah, getting the price down is the main thing. But I mean, I think it also shows that the Kinect wasn't it wasn't a factor. People weren't willing to pay more for it. And considering PlayStation 4, they also don't have any Kinect-like thing that comes bundled with it. I think really shows that people just by and large don't care about it, especially because it doesn't really enhance your games. And you did mention the Xbox, the original Xbox 360, which Kinect was did really well for, but it was a novelty then. They were riding high on the motion control bandwagon, and it was a very novel thing, and it frankly was an impressive if flawed technology. And it's even more impressive now, although still flawed to some degree. But the novelty is no longer there. People I don't think care about motion controls that much, and that's why I think getting rid of it is I mean, we both agree it makes sense. But I think by and large this is basically sending it off to die eventually. I don't think there's going to be much of a market for people buying Kinect unless they somehow drastically reduce that price on it. But I don't think, even then, I don't think it's going to matter. People will only buy it for the interface. And even then, it's mostly for voice controls, which they could do just fine just using the headset. They haven't, and they may not, but they could, and it would work fine. So I guess the next big question is, how big of a difference do you think this is going to make, Derek? Do you think this will help them catch up to Sony at this point, or do you think that ship's kind of sailed?
In some ways, I think it could only help them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely showing people that are willing to change, but also it's sort of set up a pattern for them where they had all these ideas when they initially came out, and they've backpedaled on every single one of them. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, that's all for the better. Nobody really liked the Xbox One when it was first revealed. I mean, there was a lot of things people hated about it, and Microsoft got rid of those. And this is just sort of that final thing that Microsoft is getting rid of in order to please the consumer, because they realized that all this extra stuff we put in, nobody really was interested in, or they weren't ready for. I mean, it was ambitious, but it didn't really do much. So what we have now is a much more even playing field where Microsoft and Sony have systems that are the exact same price, almost the exact same power. I mean, arguably the PS4 is slightly more powerful than the Xbox One. Mm-hmm. And right now we almost got a classic bare knuckle brawl at this point, where it literally comes to which system do you prefer, which one has the better games for you.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be what it comes down to. Yeah, I guess the thing is right now with Sony having all the momentum, though, I mean, I feel like this is, I mean, matching, price parity is great. I don't know if it's going to be enough. Because, PlayStation 4 does have all the momentum, and, Xbox One has had this terrible streak of just bad PR, frankly, that they have largely addressed, if not entirely at this point, which is all good.
It's fresh in everybody's mind,
yeah.
Because there was that whole debacle. There was the whole Sony coming out at E3 last year and just being, pumping everybody up by saying, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do these stupid things that the Xbox One was doing, and everybody loved them for it. So Sony, as you were saying, is still riding high from all that good PR, and Microsoft has to bounce back from all the bad PR. Mm-hmm. And I've already seen a couple people who was like, okay, I like these changes that they're making, but I'm still not sure if I want to get an Xbox One because of all the stuff they did before. They kind of burned me with that stuff, so I don't know if I want to support them because of that. And I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's exactly it. Will this be able to reverse the flow of all this negativity, especially with the fact that it's become such a huge story somehow. With the PlayStation 4 being more powerful than the Xbox One, or at least it seems to be. I mean, it seems to be the common theme, which, to me, I don't think matters that much, and historically it hasn't console-wise. PS2 wasn't as powerful as the Xbox, and, that didn't matter at all in that generation. So yeah, I mean, again, it will come down to games, and the timing of this is really interesting, being the fact this is before E3, but the price drop won't happen until June 9th, which is just during E3 time. which is when they will be announcing, you know, all of their games, basically, for the upcoming year, or, you know, in the foreseeable future. So that is going to be what it comes down to. Because right now, I mean, for me personally, neither of the systems, being PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, have excited me game-wise. You have a PS4. For me, though, nothing has excited me. But I will say that this does kind of tip the scales for me just a little bit in favor of the Xbox One. But what's your take on this personally? Has it made you any more interested at all in the Xbox as a platform, or is that going to depend on what they announce at E3? Or is there even anything they could announce at E3 that would get you interested in this?
Well, here's the thing, is that I've never been able to get into the 360 at all, or Microsoft's console at all. I've always looked at exclusives and tried to determine if there's something worth getting that system for. And so far, I mean, there's been games here or there that I would have liked to play on the Xbox or the 360 or, you know, stuff like that, and none of them have ever been compelling enough for me to actually buy the system. I've always been able to do multi-platform games by having, you know, a Sony system, and then Sony's exclusives always sort of bring me in. I mean, this is also just the fact that I've been a PlayStation gamer since the original one. So there is that sort of loyalty there, but Sony's never burned me enough. I mean, even with the PlayStation 3, I waited until the price came down, then I got the system, and I love my PlayStation 3. PS4, I pulled the trigger earlier than I normally would have for PS4, because I've only played 2 games so far as like big titles, and that's Assassin's Creed 4 and Infamous Second Son. Now, I like both games, but those are the only 2 available. There's very little else compelling for me to play. The big reason I got it is so I can start reviewing games when they start coming out, because for me, there are some games coming out in the future, just don't know when. We got, you know, Arkham Knight, we have, of course, Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy, and granted, you can get both of those on Xbox One, but like I said, I've been with Sony for so long that I don't think it's enough for Xbox to pull me in that direction. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's kind of opposite for you, correct?
I mean, for me right now, as I said, I don't own either systems, and neither of them are appealing to me, really, at all. The reason this tips the scales is a little bit is because the game I care about that hasn't been officially announced yet, I don't think, but everyone knows it's coming, is the Halo 2 remake. Which is kind of sad in of itself that the game I'm most excited for is a remake of a game from like 10 years ago. But I love the hell out of the multiplayer in Halo 2, and if they don't screw that up, I'm pretty much totally on board with that. And I could see myself potentially picking up Xbox One, especially if they announce, you know, more compelling software at E3. Because as is, there is nothing that interests me at all otherwise. And you know, even then, like paying $400 for one game is kind of a stretch. But it is a game that I did thoroughly enjoy back in the day, and you know, it'd be awesome to play that again, assuming they don't pull what they did with the Halo 1 remake. You know, where they just, you know, where they remade the multiplayer in the Halo Reach engine, which was so dumb to me.
And I had some mage friends that were in tournament scenes with the original Xbox, I mean, original Halo 1, and they were so excited to be able to play online with those classic maps in that classic way. And when they found out it was all based on Reach, they were so disappointed.
Yeah, because it wasn't just the maps, it was, you know, it wasn't just the maps, it was how the game played. And that changed so much between Reach. It wasn't the same game at all. But moving on, I have a question for you, Derek. How do you think this is going to affect Nintendo and the Wii U specifically? Do you think this is going to have a direct impact on them, or do you think it's going to matter? I
don't think it'll matter. I think Nintendo at this point is almost sort of its own entity. It's like, ever since the Wii, it's almost been a 2-horse race between Microsoft and Sony, and Nintendo's doing its own thing as sort of a second system. And I think Nintendo wants to get back into that race with them in some way or form, at least being able to do better as sales equal to them. But I don't think this will like make people say like, well, I was going to get a Wii U, but now I'm going to get the Xbox One since the price lowered. I don't think that's going to happen at all. And I think, you know, all 3 of these companies need to have a very strong showing at E3 this year. Both Microsoft and Sony have to show that they have games worth playing on their systems, and Wii U needs to show that there's a reason to buy their system.
Right.
So, I mean, I really don't think it's going to affect Nintendo that much, but I think there's pressure on all 3 for that for the same reason. But what about you? What do you think it'll affect Nintendo?
I don't think it will that much. I mean, it might have some minor impact. But yeah, Nintendo kind of does exist in their own bubble, which in this case isn't working out for them really. You know, but we'll see if that changes at E3. I think it is interesting that Microsoft is doing what we said they should have done, and which is something at least I've also suggested Nintendo should have done, and that's drop the gamepad from the Wii U. But we've learned from the investor meeting just last week, I think, that they're buckling down with the Wii U and the gamepad. They're going to make compelling software, or so they say, that make use of the gamepad, and they're going to be showing a lot of that off at E3. So they're taking a different strategy with us. Instead of abandoning their the main thing that they advertised, they are actually running with it. So I don't know what the better idea is in this case. I mean, it really depends if Nintendo can follow through on their promise. If they can make the gamepad look compelling, which is something I said they should have done a long time ago, awesome. Great. I'm all for that. I don't know if that's going to be enough. I don't know if people care enough about the gamepad by itself as a thing to make that matter. It might be the best chance they have. I'd say the only problem with Xbox One dropping the price, it makes Wii U seem even less appealing. Now that there are two platforms, only $100 more each, that are alternatives. Whereas you have the Wii U, which at this point is just a Nintendo box. So yeah, it's two different strategies, and I am very curious to see what's going to happen here at E3. Seeing just both how people react to all the news at E3, and seeing ultimately what the fallout is, where people do gravitate to. I actually think this is probably a good place to wrap up this discussion. Yeah, you just get our final thoughts on this. And ultimately, I think all these changes that both Xbox and Nintendo have announced will help their respective consoles. It seems like historically, it's almost been impossible to completely turn the tide. In favor of your console. Like it's such a strong, momentum is such a strong thing in this industry. And while I think these things will help, at this point, it's hard for me to conceive a future in which PlayStation 4 is ultimately the one that sells the best, followed by the Xbox, followed by the Wii U. But what do you think about all this?
Best example of this, of course, is the PlayStation 2. It came out a little later than the Dreamcast, sold gangbusters out of the gate, basically ended up killing the Dreamcast, even though arguably that was a very good system. And then because of that early start, GameCube and the Xbox were just not able to catch up. And then, of course, with the PlayStation 3, Sony screwed up at the beginning with the whole $600 price point, and we're playing catch up the entire time. Now, by the end of the console's life cycle, they had turned around completely and had ingratiated themselves with the public and made everything really appealing, which I think helped shift things in their favor for the PlayStation 4.
Right.
And the opposite thing happened with with Microsoft and the 360 to the Xbox One. So you're right, it is all about momentum here, and Nintendo, unfortunately, because they weren't really doing much with the Wii at the end of its life cycle, They lost the momentum, and now they're desperately trying to get it back. And hopefully this E3 they'll be able to find a way to get that momentum back. But they have to put out some really compelling stuff. So I'm really hoping this is going to be a really good E3 from all three companies.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I do know one game that Nintendo could announce that would totally reverse this trend and help show what the gamepad can do. And that'll be Pokemon Snap 2.
Or Mario Paint U.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Both killer apps. Alright, well I think that wraps up our Xbox One discussion, so thanks guys for watching. If you like this discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain, which you can find links to in the description below. It's a good way to keep up to date with everything we post. And of course, keep an eye on GameXplain.com for more news as we approach E3, and including E3 itself and other things gaming as well. Alright, thanks guys, bye.